They're so sweet.
We could have all waited here for you.
We didn't even know you were missing. Those are on 11, I guess.
Bill is.
Your turns are the best.
This is the food, so I guess we're behind you. What do you want us to do?
Yeah, we'll go double.
Around?
Half moon.
Half move. Okay.
You guys are tall. You go.
Well, tell us if this is
All right, you guys ready? All right, you guys ready? All right, my name is Brian Johnson, President of the Common Council, BrianJohnson. We appreciate you coming out today. We want to, first and foremost, kind of acknowledge, right, we're all wearing Packers gear, and that's intentional, and it's because we are fans of this team, and we think it's important that we have that conversation, that none of us here are doing anything that we feel jeopardizes the future of the team here in the city of Green Bay. In fact, we are trying to get to an agreement that not only recognizes taxpayers, but also supports the team in a long-term arrangement. And so that should not be questioned at all. And we're going to start today. There will be three of us who have some words to share. The first is Jennifer Grant. Jennifer is the chair of our Finance Committee. And the importance of that role is because it is the Finance Committee that ultimately oversees the lease negotiation process. I had the privilege of serving as the chair of that committee prior, and that was at a time when we made the decision to cease future negotiations. That was made by the entire council. But it is Jen's role and responsibility that as we re-engage in this discussion, it will be Jen's committee that initiates that progress moving forward. So, with that, Jennifer Grant.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for coming. My name is Jennifer Grant. I'm Alderman of District 1, Jennifer Grant. My family's legacy is intertwined with this team. My grandfather's uncle, Dominic Olenichek, is the reason we have season tickets where 4 generations have been able to sit. As my family refers to him, Uncle Dom was instrumental in bringing Vince Lombardi to Green Bay. Few can say, I danced at halftime on the same field where the Packers played at City Stadium with having graduated from Green Bay East High School, and I take great pride in that connection. It's stories like these that make our team and our community truly special, rich and in history, and are spoken about by media and journalists time and again. We become a destination, a must-see on many people's bucket lists, and I can assure you, it's not just because we've won 13 championships that earned us the name Titletown. It's the vibrant atmosphere our community creates, parking in yards, annual fence paintings, welcoming tailgates, and lively music echoing from establishment to establishment. There aren't many places where you can walk into a game alongside someone you just met, both wearing different team jerseys and sharing a sense of camaraderie. Having visited other stadiums, I can confidently say our experience is unmatched. Our city may thrive with the Packers, but the Packers also thrive because of the people of the city and its rich history. The very city that has consistently supported the Packers in time of financial need, whether through stadium taxes or stock certificates. As chair of the Finance Committee and being part of overseeing this process, $30 million that supports our police, fire, parks, and road improvements. Without this crucial funding, we will face the difficult decision of raising taxes to cover the shortfall. I hope we can foster mutual appreciation and respect in the future, as our hardworking residents and business owners truly deserve it because of the sacrifice they made when Packers needed it the most. Negotiations take time. I'm confident the city will do our part to reach a fair compromise. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jen. Second up is Bill Galvin. Bill is the Vice President of our Common Council. He's also a former member of the Stadium Board, and he was also on the Finance Committee, and still is, as we've gone through some of these discussions. So, Bill.
Thank you. Bill Galvin, Alderman, 4th District, Billgalvin. Just a couple of things I want to point out as a former member of the Stadium District Board. I believe the mayor is being treated unfairly, in so much as it's been alleged that he wants to get rid of the Stadium Board. And everyone knows, or should know, that the mayor has no ability to do that at all. The only way the Stadium Board goes away is if the state legislature, which created the board, disbands the board, or if the contract expires with the Packers. That's the only way it goes away. It was alleged that the city did not want to be involved with the stadium board negotiations, but the way we were informed was that the city and the Packers agreed to do their negotiations, and when done with those negotiations, approach the board and then see what they wanted to see as part of the agreement. So it's a little mystifying when you hear what we're hearing out of the Packers. The board only oversees and approves expenditures of leftover stadium tax money from the 2003 agreement. And that money is used for maintenance. It pays for police and fire and DPW at the stadium, along with a few other minor things. That's what the board does. They approve the expenditures of those money. They also approve the expenditures of monies from such things as the license plate sales, brick sales, and the 10% of the tax, 10% of the ticket sales goes towards building other projects at the stadium, renovations, and then they're allowed to use it to bring in venues to the metropolitan area which benefit the businesses in this area. Furthermore, the Packers want to give control of the stadium to Ashwaubenon and Brown County besides the city of Green Bay. The city of Green Bay asserts that it owns the entire stadium. Everything on it and in it is owned by the city of Green Bay. And for them to try and give that control to other entities isn't beneficial to the citizens of Green Bay who own that stadium. Despite that, the Packers agreed to negotiate with the city, and we had a lot of substantially good meetings where a lot of verbal agreements were made. When we asked them for a written agreement, it took them literally months upon months to send us a written offer, which when we got it was nothing like what we had talked about. And that's why when they are accusing of us of not wanting to come back to the table, the city spent a considerable amount of money hiring a reputable law firm to represent it during these negotiations. And even they told us it's not worth coming back if this is the way the negotiations are going to be handled. And that's why we've been waiting for the Packers to come back to us with something more like what we talked about during those months of verbal negotiations. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Bill and Jen. I'm going to go through maybe a little bit more of some timeline, a little bit of a response to some of the items that have been alleged, and be a little bit more fact-driven on some of the things that we're going to talk about. City of Green Bay obviously has a long legacy of supporting the team, and we're not starting now to demand anything that compromises their future. You have 12 alders here today who are unanimously standing here saying that we support the mayor's position on this. And when was the last time you've ever seen the city council be unanimous on anything? And so we think that's really important to acknowledge as well, because half of these folks up here didn't even endorse the mayor in the last election. All right? The mayor did not ask us to be here. This was completely initiated by the Common Council, and we feel that it was important to stand up for our city in these conversations. Additionally, there were 4 previous alders from the last Common Council who also supported the city's decision to cease future negotiations. And so that's 16 independently elected city council members and 1 independently elected mayor that were unanimous in that recommendation. And when you're independent, you form your own opinions. And I think that's really important because, because any one of those people could have said, no, we need to do something different, and none of them did that. Look, we understand the loyalty to the team. We all tailgate on Sundays. I personally took my daughter to her first game this past Sunday. But that's football. And this is business, and we need to learn how to separate football from business. For nearly a year, negotiations have occurred between the Packers and the city of Green Bay through the course of at least 7 meetings. We understand why an extended lease is desired by the Packers. They want to make substantial investments into the stadium, and they want to ensure that they have long-term control and that a future council doesn't, rise the rent after they've made those investments. We get that, and we acknowledge that, and we think that is a very smart business decision on their part. Verbal conversations have acknowledged the value of what both parties are seeking in an extended lease. Unfortunately, the Packers' written offer has not captured that agreed upon language. It includes everything that they want in a deal, but nothing that benefits the taxpayers of the city of Green Bay. The Packers have repeatedly reneged on their promise to provide revised terms that reflect our discussions. In early November, they promised revised terms within a week and repeated that promise at least 3 times since then. Nearly 2 months after they committed to giving the city a new proposal, they produced terms that are materially worse for the city than the existing lease, which is in place today. It's not in the best interest of the city taxpayers to accept a lease offer from the Packers that pays us less than what both parties have previously agreed to. We have 18 years remaining on the lease, 8 years in the base lease, 10 years worth of options. And in the term of an extended lease, the city of Green Bay would lose $30 million. Now, it's been said that it would be presumptuous that the terms of the existing lease would carry forward into a new lease, and while that may be true, we also think it's presumptuous that the city of Green Bay would accept a cut in what we have without certain concessions. The mayor has been unjustly accused of being an obstructionist by the Packers. Several of the claims made against him were issues completely unrelated to his position and for which he didn't even have control. He has acted in good faith while keeping the Common Council informed. The city and Packers agreed to negotiate terms and present them to the stadium board together, as Alder Galvin had mentioned. At no point in that process did the mayor want to box out the stadium board. The Packers and city mutually agreed to present agreed upon terms to the stadium board together. The city was reported as trying to take over medical care of players on the field, and this has absolutely nothing to do with the lease, and the Packers' attempt to correlate the two is misguided. Fire Chief Knott is the ultimate authority when it comes to public safety, and none of this can be trumped by a lease negotiation. He has identified gaps in the safety protocol and has attempted on several occasions to open a dialogue between the Green Bay Packers and County Rescue. Regrettably, all of his attempts have been turned down. An on-field incident occurred that prompted Chief Knott to institute protocols in the interest of public safety, and this happened without consultation from the mayor or Common Council, and that is his statutory obligation. The Packers have accused the mayor of taking an obstructionist approach because the city inquired with the stadium board and asked about the sale of railings. We believe this is a violation of our lease, while the Packers have countered, saying it is a frivolous issue. As a council, we believe that $3,500 per railing that the city taxpayers are entitled to is not frivolous to the average person who lives in our community. And while we may disagree on this point, if sending a letter of inquiry is constituted as harassment, as the Packers have characterized it, one can easily see the reach to grab any issue to vilify the mayor in this process and this negotiation. And where one hole exists, others probably do as well. Rebuttal by the mayor would simply be brushed off as a defense against a purposeful attack. The unanimous and unequivocal rebuttal by 12 independent members of Common Council should create pause and questions from anyone who wishes to impartially assess this process. Mayor Genrich has acted faithfully, diligently, and always with the best interests of city taxpayers in mind. This PR campaign clearly reflects a desire to disrupt the effective strategy being executed by the mayor. The mayor and Common Council are supported by a legal team, as Alder Galvin has alluded to, that has extensive experience in negotiating stadium deals across the country. Through their counsel and expertise, we agreed not to accept an offer that was less than what the Packers promised in our existing lease and what taxpayers deserve given their investment in the facility. It's been oftentimes said that the mayor and Common Council are out of their league and they don't know what they're doing. And I'm telling you folks, these are some of the best attorneys in the country who have the most experience negotiating stadium deals. The Packers have been asked repeatedly to submit an offer that reflects the discussions that have occurred to date, but they have refused to do so, instead pointing blame at the mayor and the city. It is entirely within their control to make an offer that captures what has been discussed. Providing an offer that requires taxpayers to take a cut while the fans have shown up for their organization time and time again is not the way to move negotiations forward. We must start from a place of good faith where taxpayers feel valued in this discussion. We can only assume this adversarial approach is meant to unfairly turn the public opinion against the mayor and the city. This type of gamesmanship should be rejected, and it's not in the spirit of our community's values. Common Council is ultimate authority over any lease negotiation on behalf of the city, and we are resolved and unwilling to be persuaded by anything other than what's fair to the taxpayers, the fans, and supporters of the team. Just a few key reasons and recap why the city is not willing to continue current negotiations with the Packers. It would freeze rent at 2023 levels for the next 39 years. The city would be giving up nearly $31 million in rent over that term. The Packers want to give the county and Ashwaubenon virtually permanent control over Lambeau Field, even though the city owns the stadium. The Packers aren't willing to commit to providing community benefits, right size for Green Bay, unlike every other NFL or professional sports team. The Packers won't agree to continue their existing labor and workforce commitments, let alone strengthen those provisions to be on par with worker benefits offered by the Milwaukee Bucks. The Packers aren't willing to maximize their opportunities to bring in more revenue. Instead, they are asking exclusively the taxpayers to take the cut. And the Packers won't commit to any development in the city of Green Bay, and they want the city to agree to condemn private land for Packers' private development, which isn't even legal. In conclusion, we value the team, and we recognize its economic impact in our community, and we look forward to a time when this is in the past. In the meantime, we invite the Packers to submit a new offer that's worthy of consideration if they wish for the city to renegotiate their existing terms. And with that, we would be available for questions. If you have specific questions with direct members of Common Council, we'd be happy to take those right now.
Did you guys feel you had a verbal agreement in place?
Unequivocally. There were verbal agreements. The Packers had acknowledged the items that we wanted, and unfortunately, just the offer that was written and submitted did not have any of the items in it that we had discussed.
What was missing?
Well, the community benefit statement, the request for economic investment in our community. Of course, the removal of the escalator was not something that had been talked about. So I think it's important to acknowledge that a lot of these are things that the Packers are already doing in our community. We acknowledge that, and we know that, and we're so appreciative of those investments. However, we want a lease to capture that. We're not talking about something that's the next couple of years. We are talking about something that is 40 years from now. Right now, the Packers have one of the most favorable stadium leases in all of professional sports. And we think it's only fair that we take those investments that are currently being made, and quite frankly, being made outside of the city, but being able to capture something that's right-sized for the city of Green Bay and have that be a commitment to our community.
Did they ever say that the escalator would continue through 2062?
No, that I don't know, Ben, simply because the mayor is obviously the direct negotiator on behalf of the city in these conversations along with our attorneys. But what I do know is that we have an escalator in place right now, right? And again, there's no incentive for us to step away from that. So that's why we terminated negotiations. Again, the arrangement did not capture what we wanted, but we have an escalator right now, and it's in place for 8 years and potentially 18 if they were to extend options. So there's no reason for us to concede that at this time.
I guess you keep saying, $31 million that the taxpayers would lose out on. How can you assume that if there isn't an escalator in place through 2062?
Well, I mean, obviously we want the escalator to remain in place, right? I mean, look, that's standard in any lease, right? I mean, almost every lease has an escalator built into it. I'm not sure why ours would be any different. At the end of the day, this is like a commercial lease, and that has tenant improvements in it. And I know they want that escalator funding to be diverted into a maintenance fund. I'm not aware of many leases that require the landlord to pay for continued maintenance on tenant improvements without an additional lease payment to cover that expense.
How confident are you at this point that something can be agreed on and that this will move forward in a way that can be mutually beneficial for both parties?
Sure. Look, guys, we think it's unfortunate that we're even here today, right? But the problem is that the Packers have brought this into the media now twice. We have not done that. We want this to be a cordial negotiation between two parties. And that's where we, quite frankly, we hope this is the last time that we have to talk to you. No offense to any of you here, but we think it's really important that we set the record straight with some of the accusations that were made. The mayor is absolutely not being an obstructionist. He is sticking up for what's right for taxpayers and asking for things that are completely appropriate in a lease agreement, given their presence in lease agreements all across the country. And so we want to set that record straight. And then once this is done, our sincere hope is that we get back to the negotiating table with an offer that's worthy of consideration. And if the Packers can do that, I mean, this process can move forward very, very quickly, right? But there's no value in us responding to something, that it doesn't reflect anything that was verbally agreed to.
Will the city commit to a written counteroffer to the Packers?
Not with the one that's been provided to us, right? I mean, it's such a step backwards, right? I mean, we've had agreements, right, on what should be there, and why a written agreement cannot include that, and this insistence that we have to respond to that. The Packers can submit a new agreement, right? They can do that at any time, but they've chosen not to do that. This is gamesmanship. They're choosing not to do it because they want to see our response. So if they give us something that captures what we've talked about, then we will respond.
If the Packers are willing to pay $1.5 billion over the term on maintenance, they're obviously bringing something else to the table that isn't there with the current deal. Shouldn't the city be bringing something, or at least then maybe taking less in rent?
Well, look, guys, the thing you have to understand when you do public stadium deals, right, and the government invests in these things, there's some pretty standard language that's universal across these. Community benefit statement, investment in economic development, and lease payments. Packers are missing 2 of those 3, and they're asking for a reduction in the 3rd. Okay, so this notion, right, that, gosh, if we have to concede this $30 million, otherwise we're going to have to ask the public for $1.5 billion, the math doesn't add up, right? And at the end of the day, this is, I mean, the Milwaukee Brewers, American Family Field just saw a $500,000 investment by the state. Milwaukee Bucks saw $250,000, and yet it's only local taxpayers that have funded this stadium that continues to take money and invest it everywhere but Green Bay, right? So like and that's a bit of a dramatic statement, but it's, I mean, because we obviously are getting things here, but my point is they're taking some of their philanthropy, they're going to Milwaukee, they're going to Madison. We appreciate that, we understand that. Fans exist all over Wisconsin, but the mayor has made it very clear that he is willing to stand side by side with the Green Bay Packers and go to Madison and make that request for public support, yet they've chosen to decline that. Why do they decline it? I think you'll have to ask them, but I suspect it's because when you deal with public support, it comes with conditions.
Taxpayers across the county help pay for Lambeau Field, not just Green Bay taxpayers. But how would what they're proposing give the county or Schwabenland more control over the Lambeau Field than they have now through the stadium?
Yeah, thank you, Rich. So look, when you think about leasehold improvements or tenant improvements in any kind of commercial real estate deal, usually that is at the expense of the tenant. In this case, of course, it's a little bit more complex because it was handled with the Brown County sales tax. But ultimately, when those investments are made into a property, that value stays with the property owner, unless it's movable equipment, and of course, then the tenant will remove it. So that's, why the city continues to assert that it is the owner of Lambeau Field, because it is. Now, the stadium board was created to oversee those tenant improvements that were made through that stadium tax. Now that stadium tax, as you all know, has been over for many years. There's still some funding that remains in that account, and there's value in stadium board, continuing to remain in existence until that fund is depleted. But once that fund is depleted, to have the stadium board intervene in, discussions between the Packers and the city when the city is the owner of the field doesn't make any sense. Now, that said, I get why the Packers want to do it. Their concern is, what if you have political motivations, that get in the way of obviously a very big franchise? The city has agreed to put in guardrails to prevent that from happening. Unfortunately, the Packers have rejected that and have insisted that only the stadium board can be the organization that does that.
Well, from reading the lease, and I'm not a lawyer, so I may be wrong, but it does, at one point in the lease, say that the city is giving over certain rights that it has over control of the field to the stadium board. I mean, that's in the current lease. Would that be something you want to take out of a new lease or an extended lease?
Well, I think that would be up to the negotiation, right? There are certain, I mean, that could be removed. You know, state legislation, of course, is the other option. You know, as I mentioned before, at the end of the day, the mayor is the chief negotiator on behalf of the city with the support of the law firm that we've retained on this. You know, and they're going to be the ones that talk about the details. So to your point, you're not a lawyer, I'm not either. You know, and those are the provisions that would be discussed. Now, I know the mayor has said, you know, that his long-term goal would be to have the stadium board removed. You know, it was an early part of the discussion. I don't know how substantive of a piece that discussion point was, but if that's a non-negotiable for the Packers and a new deal needs to reflect that, just make an offer that says that, but also captures the other things we've talked about, and we'll appropriately respond to it.
How should maintenance and upgrades be handled? Who should pay for that?
Well, look, it's like any other commercial property. The tenant pays for it, right? And I mean, look, folks, the city owns the property, right? We own the base of it. And improvements have been made through the sales tax. If you want, I mean, the Packers have obviously offered to make $1.5 billion of improvements, and that's great. They're already, so to answer your question, Ben, they're willing to make those investments, right? So the things that we're asking for are not trying to gouge the Packers. We're not asking for more money. We're not right. We're asking for things to be stabilized and reflect in nature what we have right now. This, if the things that we're asking for are adhered to, this would still be the most favorable deal in all of professional sports.
Yeah, doesn't the current deal change now that sales tax fund is depleted and they can't get that money to help pay for maintenance?
Well, I mean, that's part of what they, sure, right? That's why they've proposed what they have, but we're saying that they can absorb that in their budget. Guys, you have you have $1 billion operation here. I mean, the city of Green Bay doesn't even sniff that kind of money. So, you know, for us to take a $30 million cut, you know, on an agreed upon lease that we have in place right now does require us to evaluate things. I mean, they have a strategy and a plan that they've already proposed that they can make those upgrades. And we have offered to talk to the state about additional support because of the statewide impact that they make, and we're willing to do that. Let's have that conversation.
Where do you go from here then? You just continue to kind of stare at each other until somebody breaks?
The Packers can make an offer at any time. That's what we're asking. But it's got to be something that captures what we've talked about. And I think that's where we go from here. Look, the purpose of today, again, wasn't to negotiate all of the context and the details. That is up to the mayor and the Packers organization, our law firm. They will bring, hopefully, an agreed upon deal back to Common Council for their review and approval. We've got high-level things that we want to commit to, you know, but the details will get hammered out by that team. I think what this group wanted to achieve today is say, we stand behind the mayor. Right, we feel like he's been unfairly characterized in this process, and we feel that he has done exactly what we've asked him to do, and we expect that he will continue to do into the future.
Got to ask, of course, because it's highly important. How, if at all, will any of this affect the draft and preparations for hosting it?
Not at all. The city, look, at the end of the day, folks, you know, negotiations are tough, right, and they're filled with conflict, but they're also filled with crucial conversations. And we want to continue to have those conversations with the Packers. This is not meant to be a stalemate. This is not meant to be cold. This is not going to affect the draft and our commitment to what we've pledged there at all. The draft comes first, right? That stuff needs to be accomplished, and it needs to be executed at a world-class level. We're confident that the Packers and Discover Green Bay and the NFL will do that. So it doesn't change anything from the city's perspective. Okay, that's it. All right.
Thank you.
Hey, can we get our pictures taken as long as we're in front of the Green Bay?
Yeah.
I'm the picture.
I love that. You always make sure you get pictures.
Bill, where's Bill?
Bill and
Oh, Eric, could you take pictures?
Bill.